Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Design Talks. And the guest for today is Dr. Amrita. A little about her: an engineer turned an operations management business transformation professional with 19 years of experience. She's worked in industry, research, consulting, training, and teaching. She has imparted training to HESCOM engineers, Army personnel, trainers, students, and faculty members on research methodologies, project management, and digital transformation. Currently, she is the Director, Learning and Development at Pentonix e-learning services, where she is developing new and comprehensive learning strategies which aims to engage diverse talents. Welcome, ma'am.
Thanks a lot, Mohit. That actually felt nice when you read that.
Welcome, Amrita. Welcome.
Welcome, ma'am.
Yeah.
And also joining us is our very own Mr. Mahesh Ravi, the creative and academic head of Westone, an alumni of University of Wollongong, and someone who has 15 years of experience in transmedia design, an internationally recognized designer, photographer, filmmaker, and a published writer. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mohit. Thank you, Amrita, for joining us today. So, a short brief about Westones. I just wanted to give you. Westones is a media academy. We started in 2007, and ever since then, we have been conducting a lot of media-specific programs. Particularly, one of our primary domains is design. So, we as a part of extended learning that we do in our campus, we every weekend we actually invite an industry expert to share a couple of their valuable minutes with our students through various channels. And recently we stumbled upon Clubhouse and found it really, really useful. And every weekend we will have these sort of knowledge sharing sessions, and this is really beneficial for our students, and they're really, really excited, and they're waiting for you to share your experience regarding your journey as a content developer. So before we go into questions and answers, could you briefly narrate your career journey for us? Like, how did you start your career and how did you reach this point?
Yeah. Thanks, Mahesh. Uh, Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure always interacting with students and sharing the knowledge. Just to give a brief here, I did start being an engineer initially, and then worked in manufacturing industries for a couple of years, then moving to do my MBA as a very in thing at that point. Rather, it is even now. Uh, Slowly, I got into academics. In training, teaching is what something that I was very passionate about. Did my PhD in the field of business process engineering, re-engineering, and that's where I could bring in the technical aspects as well as the understanding, high-level understanding of how it can be implemented in the organizations across the world. Well, times are changing. We are all talking about Industry 4.0, something that was unheard about, say, just about 6-7 years ago. And today, everybody is talking about artificial intelligence, blockchain, machine learning, 3D printing everywhere across. And that's also what triggered my mind. And eventually, I landed up doing postdoctoral research in Indian Institute of Sciences here in Bangalore. And that's where I thought that why not, though training and teaching is my passion, with the changing times that are there, let's bring in technology into it. And when we amalgamate all of that, what we get is something called as digital learning. And today, what we are looking at is a complete transformation of the learning space. So that's how my journey has been, taking at different stages depending upon what the current situation is, and just going with the flow. So that's about it.
Great, great. It's a great journey. And especially, as you said, the times are changing and we are witnessing a lot of technological evolutions right now. So could you just tell us about your current job role and what are the responsibilities involved for you right now at this moment?
Sure, Mahesh. Before I move on to what exactly I do, I would want to set the context here in terms of how are we contributing to the entire business landscape. Just to set the context, and then we will move to my roles and responsibilities. So, what happening is in current times is, of course, we do all realize, or we have rather realized, that content is definitely the heart and soul currently in the digital media across. And what we realized here also that though the content is heart and soul, what brings it to the life is the graphic designer or the graphics. Who's representing the content, who makes it more easily digestible. Just going a couple of years ago, we are talking about pre-pandemic situation, where close to about 95% of the training that were being conducted within the industry, within businesses across, were primarily industry-led, instructor-led, sorry, were primarily instructor-led, where classroom teachings, classroom sessions were dominant across the organizations. And boom comes in the pandemic, and it has completely changed the scenario. Where during the pandemic, it has completely catapulted digital learning, digital art to another level altogether. And I'm sure all of you are also aware that with remote working, organizations were struggling to keep up their business continuity plans, to make sure that their employees are engaged. And that's where they have found, or rather, they have realized the true potential of digital learning. They have found new ways in which they can engage, train, upskill their employees. And of course, definitely, after doing this, they are definitely looking at the ROI. And what they have realized that investing in these kind of initiatives is definitely going to help them in the long run, where remote working might be a permanent option for many of the organizations at many of the cadres that are there within the organization. So that's basically what the present context that is there. And coming to the role that I have been playing here, I basically take care of content strategy, entire content development strategies, wherein we get in touch with organizations. We are talking about organizations like Honeywell, Birlasoft. There are these huge multinationals across the world. We basically get in touch with them, and there are various multiple training modules that they do have initially, which were earlier done in classroom sessions. We then tend to look at the content, understand the objective behind that particular training that they want to look at, or convert it into a digital asset. Try to bring in certain immersive learning. So we have multitude of strategies that we generally tend to use, whether it is gamification. I'm sure many of the students here who are around are quite a big fan of Valorant, PUBG, and I'm not sure whether you still have access to PUBG. So the moment these kind of game-based initiatives that are there, or game-based learnings that are there, it immediately catches people's attention. So there are multiple immersive learning strategies that we try to build in here, whether it is gamification, whether it is scenario-based learning, story-based learning, simulations that are there, virtual reality, augmented reality. So all of these is what we tend to blend into the kind of content that has come to us by keeping in the objectives and the final outcome that we are looking at from the trading perspective. So these are the different strategies which we primarily look at. Now, once we have looked at all of this, there is something called as storyboarding that is done. Storyboarding, where it's a blueprint that gets created as to how exactly is this digital asset going to look like. And once we have that in place, comes in the role of the graphic designer. And that's why I go back to my initial words here. We say, though the content is heart and soul, the life is definitely given by the graphic designer. So the role of the graphic designer here starts with understanding what the storyboard is trying to tell. What are the various animations that are used? What are the various different ways in which he or she can represent the content in the storyboard. But one important thing here that I would want to bring to your notice is when we are looking at this remote working, finding new ways to engage, train, upskill their employees via digital learning. On the other hand, employees have been screen fatigued. They are completely, continuously looking at their screens, and they are completely fatigued looking at the screens. And that is where the challenge here was basically to develop employees through digital learning where the content is made crisp and to the point, but also made sure where the graphic designer makes it very engaging and highly interactive. So that became even more challenging during this time, and I'm sure as we go ahead, because of the lesser amount of attention span or attention span deficiency sometimes that we call as, it is going to reduce gradually by the day, and for the graphic designer as well as the content developer it will become even more challenging to ensure that the learner is engaged throughout. So that is where the right amalgamation of instructional designers and graphic designers can really make the entire learning fun, entertaining, as well as achieving the outcome or the goal for which that exact learning module has been created. Yes, so that's about it. So we are trying to develop those kind of strategies around to ensure that the learning takes place in a way that it has been planned for.
Okay, that's really interesting to know because most of us here are graphic designers. So you place them rightly there, and how graphic designer fits into the whole scenario. You explained it really well. Now, I have another question, just very connected to this, and actually there are two parts to this question. So the first thing is content and design. How connected are these two domains? I just want to align this to the graphic design students here. So how connected is content and graphic design right now in your domain? See, basically why I'm asking is that this is the second part of the question. There is something called content-based design that we actually, one of the major topics here in graphic design is content-based design, where the designer needs to understand the content, and accordingly they will have to create a visual language to showcase it. I mean, even if it's animation or if it's colors and things like that, they need to understand the content and then create the design or the graphics according to that. That's one flow, one process flow. Then there is another flow where the content actually, the designer basically works on the template, and then content is actually put to this random templates where that visual enhancement is the only thing which happens, but the design language doesn't speak or connect to the content directly. So in your domain, what is the process which is followed? Is it content-based design or is it the other way around? And also, I just wanted to know, for our students, how connected is content and design, and how a student, a graphic design or a graphic designer should understand content to actually work in a domain like this.
Yeah, that's a very, very relevant question, Mahesh. Because what has happened over the years, or since when this kind of graphic designing concept has been brought in, it is considered more to be a technical skill. Yes, it is definitely a technical skill, but there's a lot of creativity that is involved in there, and in order to get that kind of creativity, it becomes very, very essential that the content has to be understood. And to answer your question, our approach is completely content based designing. As I said earlier, we do develop storyboards wherein the instructional designer will provide the kind of animations that are required, the kind of images that needs to be used, the way in which the content will get projected. All of that information definitely is given to the graphic designer in the form of storyboard, but it becomes very, very essential from the graphic designer standpoint that he puts in, or he or she puts in a little effort to understand, okay, finally, who is going to look at this asset that I am going to create? What type of learner is this? What is the content related to? If the graphic designer is able to put a little effort in understanding this, his creativity will be manifold. The kind of designs that he will come up or she will come up will definitely be far, far better than just following the graphic notes and putting things in place. And because as we are going, things are going to be very challenging, uh, as earlier also that I was pointing out, and it is going to be more complex in nature, where one part of the digital asset could be just a gamification, whereas the other part suddenly branches out into a simulation. So, how is this being developed? Why is this being developed? And how can we present it in a way that this kind of transition becomes seamless, both for the designer as well as for the learner here? So, that is why I will reiterate here that it is a collaborative effort. Graphic designer has to understand the content and then start designing the entire digital asset. And that is where the process that we follow back here is very interesting. In fact, once the storyboard is given to our graphic developer, the development team, they tend to create, but they are not limited. We do not restrict them to the storyboard alone. Storyboard gives them just one level of idea. They then try to understand the content and enhance it in a way where uh, the entire digital asset is taken to another level altogether. It is then again given back to the IDs to check. When I say IDs, I'm talking about the instructional designers, where they check what is done, how it is it done in a proper way. So there is a collaborative effort where both IDs, instructional designers, as well as the graphic developers work hand in hand to ensure the highest level of quality. So content based development or content based graphic designing is something that we completely follow here. And that's also the way to go forward, because without which somewhere the creativity then gets stagnated. So I would highly recommend for the graphic designers to definitely understand the content for which they are designing.
Yeah,
I hope I have answered my question,
oh,
answered
yes,
your
yes,
question.
yes. You did. I do completely agree to that point, because it's that is the reason we have that topic called content-based design as well. Because when students has this tendency to get carried away by the tools or maybe some certain graphic elements and all that, and they will design that first, and then they will think about the content. So the content will have no connection to the design that they are putting up. But they should be connected, and they should actually speak the same thing. So
Yeah.
as
I'll
you
just
rightly
add
said,
one
this
more.
is
Sorry to
crucial.
intervene here.
Yes, yes,
I'll
yes,
just
yes, please.
intervene. Um, though it might sound a little rude at times, but even the best of the designs, if it is not able to relate to the content, the entire effort gets wasted. So it becomes very essential that the design should be in alignment with the content that needs to get communicated to the learner or any person who's going to consume it eventually.
Totally, that actually makes sense. Now, another content related question. Here again, I wanted to connect it to graphic designers. See, basically, right now there is a lot of UX projects that graphic designers are getting into, where they are supposed to write, or come up with micro copies. Uh, as a graphic designer, they are not only focused on designing it. So there might be times where they have to come up with a micro copy, or they have to actually do a little bit of writing themselves. It could be very simple. It could be maybe creating a screen, and they could be just saying, enter your email, or maybe an error message when it actually happens, when something happens or the user does something wrong in a design, and the error message, and there is a personality to that error message, and if you are not using the right words to write it, it is a bad experience for the viewer. So how important is for a designer to understand or learn to do a little bit of content writing? And if they have to, what is the right starting point? Where should they start learning about writing content?
Yeah, that's again a very good question, because there are cases where people are looking at, bigger companies in fact, are looking at multi skilled talent. And that's where they would want their graphic designers also to bring in some content so that there is no too much of back and forth within the team. I would strongly advise in here that where the graphic designers at least should have some basic understanding of something called as Addy Model. And I'm sure it would be as a part of your curriculum also. But it's very essential that there is some element of practice that needs to be brought in here by using the Addy model, where you start analyzing the content or analyzing the purpose as to why this content is being created. That itself will give you certain understanding. And what are the cursors here that we're looking at? We're basically looking at first, very, very important, understanding the learner's persona. Even if it is single line that is getting created, it is very important to understand who the learner is, what is his persona, what impact will it have, or this particular sentence that is being created, what impact will it have, is that needs to be analyzed thoroughly. Also, parallelly, is where we should be able to know, or the graphic designer should identify the goals and the objective of the content that is being created. Then there is something called as design, and after analyzing is where the design comes in, where whether it is a sentence or a paragraph or an X amount of content that is being created, certain very specific actionable words that needs to come in the form of the objective so that there is a complete clarity. And for that, Bloom's taxonomy is one of the best ways wherein you can identify your learning goals, put them in paper. As simple example that you have mentioned, that they have to create a screen where they need to put in their details and they should do it correctly. And if they do not do it correctly, there has to be an error message. So what is the learning goal here or learning objective? To ensure that the learner or the one who's going to use that screen should not enter the details wrongly. If that clarity is obtained, automatically all the rest of the content puts in place. Hope I'm making some sense here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So here also, as we're saying, we use Bloom's taxonomy, but Addy 5 is something completely new to us. But that actually seems really, really useful to get students started with a little bit of, to get an idea of what the story is going to be and how to understand the learner and, create a little bit of content if they want to. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Now, Mohit, do you want to take over?
Yeah, yeah. As we were talking about how content is heart and soul of any design, and the content that we are making for how it's replacing the primary instructor-led sessions, and you've talked about IDs, instructional designers. I actually wanted to know, how do instructional designers and graphic designers sit together, and how does that exchange actually happens? What do actually instructional designers do, and how that helps, or how does a graphic designer help them with that, the whole process? Like a brief, if you could.
Definitely, Mohit, definitely. To keep it very simple,
Hmm.
the instructional designer, of course, I will elaborate on that, but instructional designer sets the foundation and graphic designer builds on it. That's
Okay.
the bird's eye view of what basically both are doing. So,
Hmm.
what instructional designer does here basically is using the Addy model, Guy's principles, various other instructional strategies will create a complete storyboard. Now, what is this storyboard basically? Right now, what we have been doing is earlier, of course, we were using Word document to create a storyboard,
Yeah.
but currently we've been using PowerPoint presentations to create storyboards. And this storyboard basically is creating frame by frame in each of the slides as to how this entire module is going to move, whether or how a film is going to move, or any kind of video asset that is going to transit from one frame to another, and how will each frame look. And this storyboard will have three important elements. One, of course, is the on-screen text and other images that will be used, which the learner will see or which the person will be seeing. The second important element is the VO or the audio transcript. So here is where the learner is going to listen or hear. Sometimes it could be similar to what is there on the on-screen text, or sometimes it could be a narration that is happening based on the image or the visuals that have been put across. So this is the second element. And the third element where the graphic designer would be more interested in is called as something called as graphic notes. Where if there is a clock, how is it going to tick? Where it is going to get placed? All that information is, or when will the on-screen text come into the frame? All that information will be provided in that graphic notes. And so when all of this information comes together, when the graphic designer uses this, then he starts, or rather consumes it, then he starts building onto that digital asset. So the instructional designer will completely set the foundation by creating frame by frame on the PowerPoint slide, each of the slides, and create the entire storyboard there. The graphic designer will pick up that storyboard, create each of the frame based on the instructions given by the instructional designer, and then finally come out with the digital asset. And that is the reason why there is this right collaboration between the instructional designer, what he has visualized. The graphic designer, excuse me, the graphic designer will now translate that visualization into a digital asset. Mohit, hope I have answered your question.
Yeah, ma'am. That was brief and to the point. And yeah, there was one more thing. Like in storyboards, as you talked about, there's audio as well. Like a part of it, a part of the asset could have more emphasis on audio. So is that something that you incorporate in the storyboard itself, or that's something that gets uh, worked on as you progress through it? Like when the designer is already working on it, then it's decided, okay, here's the audio that's need to be emphasized, or that's something that's happened in the planning phase only.
It is actually phase one, rather two phases that we look at. Now that we are talking, we have multiple phases, but then when we are looking at it, we look at it in two phases. The first phase where the storyboards gets created uh, based on the raw content analysis as the Addy model that we were talking about. Once that content is in place, that content gets translated into a storyboard with all the three elements on each of the frames, be it audio, on-screen text, as well as the graphic notes. So actually that's where the point that I wish to highlight here is instructional designer already visualizes how the digital asset is going to look like. That is where all the instructions will be given. And then it is then passed on to the graphic designer with a complete set of instructions.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
I get a better idea of it. Like the framework itself that's been done in the storyboarding phase itself, like the whole instructions and everything. It's the execution that goes on to the graphic designer. And
absolutely, Mohit.
yes, ma'am. And there was this is really intriguing to me when you said there's two parts where a content could be based on gamification, and that has to be transformed into or transitioned into. I'm forgetting what it exactly was, from gamification to simulation. Yeah. So how do you plan that? And if you could give an example for any content where that happened, I was really curious about this part.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. We've been working with aerospace industry here. So there are certain technical elements, technical training. It was a technical training where there is a particular engine and the working of the engine that had to get the training had to be developed for that. And there was a particular software which they were using to understand this whole working of the engine. And what we did was we screen recorded the entire thing, a simulation, know me, or show me rather, kind of a set that got created initially. And later part of the simulation, there is a gamification where it is called as game-based assessment. One element. Gamification has multiple elements. So game-based assessment is what we try to incorporate, where we simulated or we created a game like situation where they were going in for a treasure hunt and going in a plane from one place to one island to another island. And they were asking, we asked them questions, and only when they answered questions they could move from one island to another island, and they got points, and eventually they had to score some points in order to clear that entire model. So this is basically simulation in terms of understanding how the entire training is happening, what kind of skills that needs to get imparted, and later on we try to reinforce as well as check the understanding that has been imparted by way of game based learning. Here I would also want to bring to your notice that it's not that graphic designer only has to understand the content. The instructional designer also has to understand the different types of tools that are there, which authoring tools that the graphic designer uses, the kind of output that will be coming from each of the each of the authoring tools that are there, whether it is Pound tool, whether it is Beyond, Articulate, Lectora. The instructional designers are very adept in terms of understanding which tool can be used where, and that understanding will come only when they know some basic elements of the different tools. So that's how we also work at Pentonix, where instructional designers are completely oriented on the type of tools that the graphic designers will be using. So when they specify that a whiteboard animation has to be done for a particular slide, they exactly give those kind of related instructions and also the kind of images or graphics that needs to be used. So that's where they go hand in hand.
Nice, nice. Um, I was also curious, how do you decide actually? Like, how do instructional designers decide which content is best for this? Or in the planning phase itself, like, we can go for a particular assignment and say gamification is something that will work the best, but is it something they're basing it on just experience? Or is it something that you test and then follow up with it? What's the process there?
It is a very highly creative process that instructional designers are into. So the moment the content is given to them, they start visualizing how the learner will see this content. How should it look to him or her so that it will make the maximum impact and attain the objective? And that is the reason, I'll go back to my words again. Instructional designers lay the foundation. So here is where they have already visualized that how the content will look, how it needs to get represented, so that the whole or rather to bring it little more structure, we use multiple models here. That is, Addy model is one. Then there is Kirkpatrick's model for assessment and evaluation. So there are multiple models, multiple theories that are there, wherein when we look at the content, the first thing that we will always understand, or rather want to give it to a learner, is develop curiosity. So how do we develop curiosity about that particular content that we are going to discuss in, say, probably next 2 minutes or 1 minute? So there are ways in which there is a structure, sometimes a scientific structure that we use, wherein we create curiosity, bring in the objective, bring in the content, then check the understanding. But in all of this process, instructional designers are very, very creative. They might be following a simple process like this, but within that content, how it needs to get represented varies from one instructional designer to another instructional designer, which completely happens at the planning phase itself. So all of this is thought through and then is represented in a form of a storyboard. So that's where storyboard becomes a bible for the graphic designer.
Yeah, it's like the you have to build a strong foundation, and that's where it's really built.
Right.
It's really cool.
Amrita, I just had a question. So, just curious. Now, we are actually in whatever products that we are making right now, the target group is huge at this moment because of the pandemic. Everyone is either trying to learn online or consume content digitally. So, your target might have actually multiplied or quadruplied, right? So, see, what I'm saying is that if have you tried using any new media techniques so far, like augmented reality or virtual reality, to make all this crowd, which is from different demographics, different interests, and all that, to give them something a little more immersive. So have we used any of those technologies? If you have used it, what is your process there? How do you work, or who will actually assist you there in that particular process to implement the technology? Because I've seen somewhere like augmented reality was used in classrooms and things like that. So is it something which comes under your domain of e-learning development?
Yes, Mahesh. We have been doing a couple of projects on virtual reality and augmented reality. Especially in healthcare domain is where we are using augmented reality. Where what we do here, again, I'll go back to the storyboard, where storyboard does say that we will be using the augmented reality, and we bring in graphic designers. We have certain specific technical people who assist us in developing softwares associated to augmented reality, and then we try to integrate into something called as chrome packages around, so that it becomes easier to what do you say, consume it, and also track who is using it and how to evaluate the entire process. So we are also slowly building on that, both virtual reality as well as augmented reality, because that's the in thing as of now. So for this immersive learning, sticky learning is what we are aiming at. Based on the corporate requirements, we do tend to use these kind of technologies. So again, it is completely left to the visualization of the instructional designer, as well as, of course, coming from the corporate requests saying that they do want to put in. But what happens here is, most of the times when we look at virtual reality or augmented reality, these kind of assets are preferred in hazardous areas, hazardous trainings, or safety trainings is what we call them, where they don't want employees to get exposed to situations where it could be very hazardous to them, just to give them the feel of the field. So in order to give them the feel of the field, these kind of technologies definitely come in very handy. So it could be a combat attack that needs to be taught, or it could be as simple as the a pilot training that is being conducted. So entire cockpit is simulated into a virtual reality platform, so that he feels what he is doing. And likewise in healthcare also, especially with the organs, understanding of those organs, augmented reality are playing a big role in imparting the kind of knowledge and understanding that the learner has to have.
Great, awesome. We've also included augmented reality and virtual reality in our curriculum. So hopefully, e-learning industry is also going to be one of our potential domains to look.
No, definitely. In fact, I would want to bring in some very important points here when we're talking about the career of graphic designers in the organizations across, not only just for e-learning developments, whether we talk about Big Four, say Deloitte, Accenture, JP Morgan, and all of the other bigger companies that are there. They have created a specific segment which requires graphic designers, instructional designers, because they want to bring in their in-house capabilities. And it is not just about e-learning, it is multiple things that they are looking at. But e-learning definitely is coming in a very big way. In fact, it is not restricted to just creating certain modules. Now organizations, we at Pentonix itself, we are going to a next level where we are creating learning experience, the LXP products, or what we call it as. And what are these LXPs? LXPs is where you will have string of different learning modules all put together at a very nominal rate. Say for example, aerospace industry, where there is not much of content that is available when you Google it across. We put that where Coursera is offering somewhere, say for 3,000 rupees or 4,000 rupees a course, we will be offering that, say, just about 500 or 600 rupees. So this is just one thing. So there are multiple things that are coming up in a very big way, where graphic designers have tremendous potential in shaping their careers in a very long term growth. And in fact, at our end, we have been training our graphic designers in Rise, Captivate, Lectora. Any new tool that comes in, they are all trained on that, so that it is very dynamic. The e-learning scenario or the digital art itself is very, very dynamic. So every day there are new tools that are coming up and you need to catch up on that. Also, one more interesting thing here is that companies like us are working on multiple domains. So morning probably you're working on something on healthcare, evening probably you're working on an insurance sector, or go to aerospace or come to manufacturing industry. So that way the graphic designer will have wide exposure in the kind of work that they are going to do, and that will definitely make them more confident. And just down the lane, say probably 2 years 3 years down the lane, they can aim to be in one of the larger MNCs or bigger companies around the world, as working as a graphic designer and contributing as an in-house graphics team. So it is definitely in a big way, and that's where I would request all your students to put in the kind of efforts, take up as many projects, internship projects, things like that, so that they continuously keep abreast of what is happening in the market. So I'm sure you would now add
Very
e-learning
true.
as a part of your
Definitely,
syllabus as well.
definitely, definitely, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, e-learning is like it's been growing, and it's included almost everything. Like I had a teacher who's a VFX, he was an expert in VFX, and he's working in e-learning now. So yeah, that that has kept growing, and I've seen it grow so far. Um, to everyone, we have the hand permissions on now. If you have questions, you can raise your hands from now on.
Ma'am, before it goes to I mean, there are a lot of people might ask questions. So before it goes there, I just want to ask one thing. Meanwhile, people can raise hand and join there. You mentioned so many things about, like the last one you mentioned, adding e-learning in our curriculum and things like that. But I'm always very interested in this industry academia gap. So if you have to, you're at L&D, you have trained so many people, you would have seen freshers, beginners. So if you have to tell something like industry academia gap there, this is what is really the gap there. What is that in your experience, which you feel this is the gap, industry academia gap? What is that, ma'am?
Unfortunately, the industry academia gap in India is very wide. I have been on the other side also. I have been a part of I have been academician myself as well, and that's where I felt the gap is always there. Um, why I use the word unfortunately here is because not many organizations tend to um, trust, rely on the capabilities of academia. And it's the vice versa also, where academia is not being polished or groomed in a way where they are able to do consulting and give handhold to the organizations. If we look at universities across the world, the academia and industry gap is nil, because they are so collaborative, so they are so
Okay.
working closely together, and that's where their output has been extremely well.
Okay. Okay.
There is
Okay.
something called as learning organization.
Okay.
So when we call as learning organization, this whole concept here is where the industry and the academia are growing together. They collaborate at multiple levels, through
Okay.
students, through faculty members, could be deputation on projects, could be internships for students. So there are multiple collaborative efforts that are made within the organization and with the organization as well as with the institutions, so that this gap can be narrowed as much, or rather bridged in a better way. Yeah.
Okay. 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 Yeah, I got your suggestion as well, like your tip as well. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mohit, you
Thank
can.
Thank you, ma'am. And Sarish, you have a question?
Yeah, Mohit, hello, ma'am. Good evening.
you.
Uh,
Good evening, Sailesh.
yeah, ma'am. How do you explain? Would you tell that e-learning will be the next thing for the learning thing, or is it only the phase where this pandemic ends, or it is going to be going on in the future also?
Yeah, that's a good question, Sailesh. Though it has triggered, pandemic has triggered the use of e-learning in a very, very wide way. But this is definitely going to stay, because what organizations have realized here is that the return on investment is very high. Plus, there is something called as flow of work. Earlier, when classroom trainings were conducted, there could be people coming around from India, probably outside India, or they are sent somewhere outside India. They were restricted to that one classroom, one timing, probably spend an entire day, extend to another day, where their work was getting hampered. What organizations have realized now here is that this kind of digital learning or e-learning can be in the flow of work. So there are something called as micro learning, some these micro nuggets that are created. So what to do, kind of things. The learner can spend or the employee can spend just about 5 minutes in a day or 3 minutes in a day and understand what he needs to do. So he quickly goes there, understands that, and then starts applying. He doesn't have to spend or organize an entire training to be done at that level. So organizations have realized their potential in this, whether it is compliance training, whether it is sales products training, or even from customer standpoint, if they have to give in certain kind of product training, all this becomes very, very helpful. So organizations have realized, and many of the organizations are investing in creating these kind of e-learning modules for their employees as well as customers. So I'm sure it has for the next 20 years, definitely it is going to be around.
If it is going to be around, like how effective it will it be like comparatively to the online learning and to the offline learning? Like, will it be the same or like there will be some differences because we are also learning online and we are right now attending classes online. So there will be gap, like it differs from subject to subject and topics to topic. So how will that can be balanced?
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens here, the kind of classes that you are attending, they are basically instructor led sessions. The kind of digital assets that we create, it's a blended learning. It's called blended learning. So that's where I was mentioning at one frame, we will be putting in some whiteboard animations, the way in which the learner gets engaged. On the other hand, there could be a virtual instructor led training. So where your professor is still speaking, but we are now able to enhance that entire video. I'm sure you would have seen some videos on Coursera, Udemy and stuff like that, where the instructor is still speaking, but there are multiple graphics that are being used so that it captures the attention. Otherwise, just looking at the professor and he or she speaking, you might tend to lose out on the kind of information that you are supposed to grasp in. So that is where, in fact, e-learning is even more effective. And if you remember, I did mention something called as game-based learning, gamification, uh, story-based learning, and scenario-based learning. All these are different kinds of strategies that are used to ensure that they are very engaged, they are very immersive, and there is a sticky learning taking place there. Hope I have
Okay.
answered your
Yeah,
question,
yeah, ma'am. Yes,
Shahish.
ma'am.
Yes.
Another thing, like if this is going to continue and if this is going to grow, the e-learning thing. So, how will the people who are like from very for a very long time been teaching offline, going schools, and will they be like that efficient or maybe that comfortable enough to adapt to these kind of teachings online? I'm saying about the professors who have been like lecturers who
Hmm.
have been teaching students offline, like they don't have any like basic knowledge like doing the being creative and giving the presentation to the students or like making
Right,
this kind of online stuff.
right,
So
right.
will it be helpful for them in future maybe because if there is going to be a thing.
Absolutely. So I understand your concern completely. Uh,
Yeah, man, yeah.
yeah, I do understand. See, what happens here is now imagine last year, the same professors that you were talking about were completely onto either a blackboard or a whiteboard, where they would use markers, chalks, and make you understand, and probably use PPTs at times for further enhancement. Overnight, they learned how to use Zoom, how to use similar types of platforms like Zoom, and start conducting classes. Right? It was the need of the hour. They did not have a choice. Likewise, going forward also, they will have to adapt themselves to these kind of technology orientation, also to bring in these kind of changes in the way they are going to engage their learners. It becomes very, very essential. There are many organizations, to institutions rather, today have picked up a very common LMS that is used, called as Moodle. This Moodle is a platform. It's a learning experience platform which is being used, which earlier professors never used. Now they have been using, they are creating interactivities on that, the kind of assessments, the kind of projects. All this is to ensure that they are as much engaged, even if it is a remote learning scenario. So whether the professors will cope up, just to answer your question, whether the professors will cope to the kind of changing scenarios, I would rather say they don't have a choice. They have to. And institutions have also realized it, and they are in fact putting in efforts to give them that kind of orientation as well. So this kind of blended learning is something that will stay even if classrooms open, even if school colleges open, because what they have found here is a potential. There is something, if you, I'll go back to your classrooms, wherein sometimes syllabus coverage became an important issue there. You said, Professor, I'm sure many of your professors will also resonate with this. They say, I want to teach so many things, but I don't have time. My number of hours is something that is not very supportive of this. Plus, students have to do multiple kinds of projects, so we need to free them for that as well. So this blended approach will always be there, because a part of the syllabus can get videographed, a virtual instructor-led sessions that can get created, so that students can take these sessions at any point of time, anywhere that they want to. And for certain very specific topics, they can always come back to the classroom and have that kind of interaction. So this blended approach will always be there going in future. Right?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Varsha, do you have a question?
Yes, if it's possible.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Go ahead.
Okay, hello, ma'am.
Yeah, hi, Varsha.
So during this session, I understood how content is understanding the content and executing it in a creative way is important for a graphic designer. But and you also spoke about how instructional designers have an orientation of the technicalities of the graphic design. So I wanted to understand further about how oriented should a graphic designer be about the content, because there is, like any field, there might be something that the graphic designer is completely unaware of, like especially in the content aspect. So how oriented or how much acquainted should the graphic designer be?
Yeah. The prime focus of the graphic designer here should be in terms of understanding the learner's persona. Not necessarily that the graphic designer has to completely understand. Say a graphic designer is working on something related to healthcare, probably an oncology related or cancer related issue. So definitely we cannot expect graphic designer to understand why the cancer is there and all the other technical details of it. But definitely the graphic designer has to understand whether this particular content is being consumed by the doctors or by the nurses or by the patients. Who is the final consumer of the design that I am going to create? And if he or she is able to understand that properly, then I'm sure his designs will also reflect the final outcome which is expected.
So, as I understand, so the graphic designer should more focus on the end user rather than the depth of the content. Am I in the right direction?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Varsha. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Gauss Khan sir here as well. Sir, do you have a question?
Good evening, Dr. Amrita.
Good evening, Gauss sir.
Thank you very much for accepting our invite for this session, and it was really wonderful. My
Pleasure is
question
all
was,
mine, in fact.
thank you, and we are happy that you have recruited a couple of our students from Westones, and they are doing extremely good, along with your colleague Ms. Gayatri.
Yes, in fact, we are planning to hire a few more also in coming days. So
Great,
we'll
great.
look
She's
forward
always
to that.
behind me to give me the candidates.
Yes.
Yeah. So the question
Oh,
is like,
that's good.
and all credit goes to our mentors like Mahesh and Cyril and all those people and wonderful students who come with the passion to be in this
Absolutely.
industry.
Absolutely. I would just want to put this on record. Maybe I will digress a little bit here. students from Westone are doing extremely well. We are so very happy with the kind of outputs that they are giving, the kind of zeal that they show on day-to-day basis. Even if they are working for say 9 hours, 10 hours a day, they are still doing with the same passion at the start of the first hour. So the due credit definitely, as you said, sir, goes to all the professors who are there, who have nurtured them so well. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
We
it
ensure
makes our
that,
day. Thank you.
and more responsible also, Mahesh, for all of us towards the industry. My question is like now we do have a VFX vertical also. So how do you see that VFX will take more center stage in the e-learning over a period of time?
Yeah, VFX will take a big, it's going to come up in a big way in e-learning as well. In fact, there are many of the bigger organizations who want to use VFX so that they are trying to create more engaging content for their employees to consume. So next, if we look at say next about 2-3 years, there will be major usage of VFX in the e-learning content as well. That's how we are able to foresee that so far.
Right, because many big companies like Byju's and other people have already started it, but then some people think that edtech is something different, and VFX cannot be used, or like that. So just wanted to understand like how this will go both together for a period of time.
No, definitely it has got great prospects. In fact, e-learning is now touched with any new technology that is being discussed. E-learning is edutech, or rather as we call it as, is utilizing all of those technologies because it's being so demanding. Every organization wants to stand out. They want to ensure that the kind of development that is happening, the kind of training that is being imparted to their organization, the employees, have to be best in class. So they are pushing us rather to use these different technologies across. So I'm very confident that VFX also will play a very major role here in days to come.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the your insight on this question. Actually,
Thank you, Gauss sir.
over to you, Mohit.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Um, ma'am, are you okay with 5 more minutes? Like we are way past of our time.
No problem, Mohit. We can continue.
Thank you, ma'am. Lakshmi, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mohit. Good evening, ma'am. So, with an experience, in IT, I work for Accenture. I do understand what you're talking about. E-learning is a big deal with Accenture. All our, learning boards, everything comprised of, this new way. So we have ethics and compliance trainings. We have security trainings, sexual harassment trainings. Everything being done like this, and it's not that and these are done every quarter. So each time you're attending this training as a mandate, it's a different module. It's redone from scratch, and it's so engaging, and I can vouch for this actually. But a little off topic, I just wanted to know, how is content designing and digital marketing? So where does digital marketing fall into the whole picture? Because as content, let's say content writer, you should also have a little knowledge about the marketing aspect, right? So where do you put that in?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lakshmi, and I completely agree with what you said in terms of the kind of digital learning modules that are being created across big organizations. Uh, when we talk about digital marketing, again, I come to very simple basics here. Instead of using learner, I will say who is the individual who's going to consume that. Are you doing it for a particular target audience to hit a particular target audience? Yes, you would be, right? So if you are able to understand, see the strategy in developing content is very simple, but the whole um, process within the person who's going to actually write the content is could be slightly more churning. The strategy is simple. You first identify whom are you going to target. What are your target audiences for whom are you going to write this content? If you have a clarity on that, automatically your digital, whether it is a digital marketing content or whether it is a simple digital learning content, all of that falls automatically in place. Plus the kind of tools that we are using, the kind of platforms that we are talking about. Definitely not platform, of course we look at LMS and all, but for digital marketing we do a lot of social media marketing and create content for all of that as well. Now, one is to understand who's the target audience. On the other hand, you also have to understand here is that how do I attract attention of the target audience? If there are these two things that are kept in mind, it could be through a negative comment, a negative fact, or it could be through a positive fact or a positive comment. In either of the cases, there is a possibility of attracting attention. And digital marketing does what? The basic objective of digital marketing is to attract attention, and only then you are able to communicate whatever that you want to communicate, because there are multiple ads, different kinds of contents that are there as a part of digital marketing. Why will a surfer or a person stay put at your particular site or your post? Primarily because you are able to attract attention. So if these two important elements can be taken care of, I'm sure developing content for digital marketing is also can be done this way.
Right.
Hope
Yeah.
I have answered your question,
Yes.
Lakshmi.
Yes. Definitely, you did. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi, and thank you, ma'am. We are like way past our time. So really glad to have you here this evening, Dr. Amrita. We had really great insight into e-learning and a few models and how things go, actually, the whole process from IDs to graphic designers. I guess a lot of us now have a clear idea if we were to be in this area, what all do we need to consider. Thank you for imparting that knowledge, ma'am.
Thank you, Mohit. The pleasure has been completely mine, and I hope that I've added some value to your students.
Yeah,
And thank you so much
A
for all the
lot.
faculty members also.
Thanks, Amrita.
Definitely,
Thanks for
Amrita.
coming
It's
and
a
joining
pleasure
us.
having you. It was a great evening listening to you. We've learned a lot about the industry, and the students had an amazing experience. I think they've learned and they've asked a lot of interesting questions. So it was really nice to have you here. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot, man. Thank you. Thanks, Amrita. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amrita. Hopefully, we might keep requesting you for such more sessions in the coming days.
Definitely. Definitely.
With all your
It will be my
permission.
pleasure. Yes,
Right.
definitely.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye.
thanks everyone who joined, and thanks to our faculty and everybody who came in. Thank you and have a good evening. We'll see you in the next design talk.
Night night. Bye bye.
Good night.